It's now officially autumn. It's a time of golden light and preparing for the seasons ahead. And there is a lot on my gardening to-do list. That includes collecting seeds and spreading compost, and of course bringing in the last of the summer harvests. Annual plants are also beginning to die back, so that means a lot of clearing and tidying is on the cards. There are also cold season crops to think about, and I have a handful of seeds to sow. One of the biggest lessons that we learn in life is when to let go. And we learn that on so many levels, but we also learn it in the garden. And now as the seasons are changing and plants are starting to die back and leaves are beginning to fall, it's judging when is it time to take down plants. So specifically edible crops, so things like tomatoes and things like kale and other types of vegetables out in your garden. If you grow ornamentals, it's worth just letting them die off and leave them in the beds. But in your growing areas where you're growing food, and if you hope to have winter crops, it's best to remove all types of dead plants, make space for new ones that can overwinter, and reduce places for pests to live and hide and come out and get your winter crops. And so today I'm going to start my garden tasks for September with clearing out the greenhouse, which has been a fantastic place for growing container plants this year. I've grown everything from a tumbling cherry tomato in there to strawberries, melons, so much. But now I need the space to propagate some new cuttings, to start off some seeds, and to grow some things over winter. I also plan on using the space to overwinter some of my container plants. So I need to get it completely cleaned, a proper deep clean, including the glass, and remove all areas where slugs can live. Cleaning out undercover growing spaces at least once a year helps to remove mold and fungus and muck and pests. It creates a clean space where plants have a better chance of surviving. You know, it's hard sometimes to know when to take down crops. There's the thought of a late harvest or maybe an emotional tug. But to make space for new, you need to remove the old. So I've decided to take down all of the tomatoes and the Malabar spinach I just planted. Unfortunately, it just wasn't growing much. I've picked the green tomatoes though, and I'm taking them inside to ripen. Then it was sweeping and cleaning and scrubbing and spraying. I use just homemade unscented soap and water these days. The amount of mud and goo I found was incredible, and you can bet that I saved all the worms that I could and guided the spiders to safer nooks. Well, it took quite a few hours to get that all sorted. It's all nice and clean. I've moved a lot of plants back inside, some seedlings as well. And I'm going to show you everything that's in there, the setup and the plan for sowing seeds for this autumn and winter. But first, I want to tell you about an online resource that can help refresh your creative spark. This video is sponsored by Skillshare, the largest online learning community for creatives. It has thousands of how-to and creative classes in topics ranging from art, creative writing, social media, cooking, gardening, and so much more. The classes and learning paths are all video-based, so you watch a series of videos to learn new skills. Once you've joined, you can watch as many classes as you would like. Each class is made up of a series of videos, some short, some longer. But by the end, you could be making sourdough bread, taking stunning garden photography, or writing a novel. The Creative Writing Bootcamp is perfect for this time of the year because as it starts getting a little bit colder, we'll be spending more time indoors and we'll have more time to pursue the things that we've always wanted to do. So you could sit down and finally get started writing your first story. Learning how to get inspiration and tricks to get words on paper could be your back-to-school moment. It's self-care that you can do at your own pace and in your own home. So, would you like to try it absolutely free? The first 500 people to use the link in my video text description will get a 1-month free trial of Skillshare. I highly recommend it. The greenhouse is so much cleaner. Everything from the floor to the glass, which is sparkling, to the sides, all the way around. It's all just clean. I mean, it's not operating room clean, but it is clean enough, and it's going to be so helpful in helping to keep all of these plants that are inside healthy and the seedlings to come. I have kept a few things. The sweet potatoes, I've moved them out here more into the sun because they've got another month or two of growing still. And the melon here, that is almost ripe. And when this one is ripe, I'm gonna take it down. This little one is not really going to ripen, so I'm not gonna worry about that. I've also kept the peppers. These are ready to harvest, but I just don't have the time right now, so I'm gonna leave them in here and harvest them when I can. I've also left the pallet planter here in the middle, although I've taken out the plants that were in it. And what I'm gonna be doing with it is just leaving it here because I'll be using it next year and putting some more potting mix in the top. And in the meantime, I've set all of these potted plants inside, and this is a good place for them to overwinter, especially the terracotta plant pots, because if they are sitting on the concrete here, they can freeze if we get a really deep freeze, and it can split the pots. So the pots and the plants are a bit more protected by setting them here in the pallet planter. The vast majority of the plants here on this rack are ones that were outside and a bit neglected, I'll be honest. So I've moved them inside, I've watered them, and hopefully they grow some new leaves in the next month or so. We've got everything from sweet cicely to wild strawberries to different types of medicinal herbs. I also have some bearded irises that I've just bought. So these 3 here, I'm going to start growing them next year. So basically all of the plants here are just my spares, and it's helping me to keep track of what I have, but also to help encourage some growth for the ones that are a little bit sad. They will bounce back, especially the really hardy ones back here, the vervain and the motherwort. The vertical planter that I have over here, you can really see it now. I've cut back the strawberries, and you can do this in late summer, autumn if you want. You can already see fresh new growth. Although the ones out in the main garden, I'll leave the leaves because they do help protect the plant over winter. And at the top here, I do have some coriander, which I'm going to be saving for seed to grow again next year. So this is cilantro, which in the States, the seeds are called coriander, whereas the leaf is called cilantro. Here it's just coriander. Everything's called that. And then over here, I've moved the seedlings that I had left over from the polycrub. We've got some brassicas here, foxgloves that need pricking out, other types of cuttings that I have rooted, rosemary and lavender. And then we've got some lettuces here. These ones here are going to be going out into the polycrub when I have that middle bed sorted. And these ones here will stay in here, and we'll just pick them as we need them. Both greenhouses and polytunnels, including my polycrub, which is a hard-shelled polytunnel, can be used to start off seeds, to grow crops. There are plenty in here right now, and also to extend the season. And to extend the season, what does that mean? It means to grow crops that ordinarily wouldn't be happy out in the ground at certain times of the year. So we're talking about spring, we're talking about autumn, and we're talking about winter. And the polycrop in particular has been brilliant at being able to grow winter crops. Now last year I had cabbages and cauliflower right down this middle bed. The year before, this far bed over here had tons of lettuces, Asian greens, mustards, things like that. Now the problem is that I don't have any space in here right now. I've got sweet potatoes over here. They're not going to be ready to dig up until November. There's aubergines down in the far corner. They are still producing fruit. I don't want to take them down. Loads of tomatoes over here, which will probably be up for maybe the next few weeks. But down the middle bed here, there is a lot more potential space because the crops are starting to die down. And other than this lovely cherry tomato, which I will leave in, I'm going to take everything else out. And this is a lesson that we all have to learn at some point if we want to extend the season into winter, is that we have to make sacrifices of plants, even if they look good, even if we might get a few more small harvests off of them. if we don't take them down, if we don't give young plants and seeds the opportunity to establish, then it'll be too late. And so again, learning to let go of plants, send them to the compost heap and start this new cycle. This is a real lesson in gardening. I had a good look at all of the plants growing in the center bed and decided that I'd leave the cherry tomato and one melon plant to continue growing. Then I set to work cutting everything else down. There were a few harvests I took along the way, but everything else, all the leaves, everything went into the wheelbarrow, and we'll take it down to the compost pile later. After clearing the bed, I spread handfuls of an organic granular fertilizer, raked it in a bit, and then gave it a good watering. Then I got to work planting out lettuce seedlings. They're a variety called George Richardson, a lovely dark green cause lettuce that I also saved seeds for this year. It was so easy to save lettuce seeds, and now I have a good supply for next year. That center bed is starting to fill up with leafy greens. I have my George Richardson lettuce in there. It's my first year growing it, but it has turned out to be our favorite lettuce. We'll see how it does over the winter. And I've got more to sow in just a second. There's also the rocket, so the arugula in there, and that's pretty hardy. It's also perennial, so it'll come back next year. Got some outside as well. And my neighbor dropped these off. These are basil plants that she propagated from a supermarket plant, and she got way too many for her own needs, and so she dropped them by. It is a little bit late in the season here to be propagating basil and expecting it to grow, but I think inside the polycrub here, it should actually bush out a little bit, and I could get a decent harvest next month, and then I can use it to make pesto and then freeze it. I've got a good handful of seeds here, and I want to show you them all, and I'm going to sow some of them, but not all. Mustard to start though. You might be more familiar with the yellow mustard condiment than you are the leaves. Well, the seeds themselves are what is used to make mustard that most people are familiar with. But the leaves themselves have that mustardy, spicy flavor as well, and they're winter hardy. And so I'm going to be sowing both of these types. So this is a red leaf variety, and this one is a green leafed. I've got several different types of lettuce here. And I've got the George Richardson already on the go, and that's kind of a dark green cause variety. But I will be sowing winter density because this is a really good producer in winter, and you can even sow it in winter and it can grow. The other varieties I have here are Jack Ice and Reine de Glace, and I think I might sow these just because the seeds are getting a bit old. This last variety is a chef's medley that I have from Botanic Interests in the States, and it's a really nice mix of lots of different types of greens, and I'm going to try to squeeze this one in as well. And it's got some Asian types of greens in there like Mizuna and Mibuna. Instead of sowing these seeds direct into the beds, I'm sowing them into modules first. And I'm doing that because I'm not sure how many of these seeds are going to be viable. These ones are many years old now. This is the Jack Ice one. And also, I'm going to be removing more of the plants in here. So the aubergines, they aren't looking the healthiest. So as soon as I'm finished harvesting all of those fruit, I'm going to take them out, and that will be even more space to maybe plug in some more plants. And if these are growing in a tray somewhere or in as little plugs, then they can grow, and then I can transplant them out when there's space for them to grow. And the other thing that I'm doing is that with these ones, I'm just sowing little drills because it's easier, and I can put a lot more seeds in there at once because I don't know what the viability of these is going to be. Whereas the ones that are a little bit more recent, like the winter density, I feel much more confident in taking them out of the seed packets and then just putting a couple at a time into individual modules. If you do that with older seed, it could be that a good number of them don't germinate, and then you've just wasted a bit of time. Now, the benefit of using seed that is within its best by date is that you can trust it, and there's a little bit less work because you can put them directly into these modules and then just thin them out a little bit and let them grow. Whereas if you do the drill type of sowing, like I have done here, you have to then prick them out and then plant them into modules as an extra step. The main vegetable garden is basking in the last of this year's warmth. Root crops swell under the ground while leaves, seed heads, and flowers seem to glow in the light. There are apples and raspberries to pick, carrots and beets to pull, and cold hardy crops like leeks and kale ready for winter harvests. Still, it's not been the most productive years for me in terms of yields. The weather has for much of the summer been unseasonably cool, wet, and windy. Instead, I think that I've enjoyed the garden much more for its beauty and life this year. My veg patch is for food growing, but I also grow it because I love to garden and I want to support the natural world. There's much to do in the next few months, but I'm looking forward to next spring already. Every year is a new start, and I'm getting ready to let this one go. In my last video, I shared how you can make a hot compost pile. So saving up lots of brown material, like cardboard is what I mainly used, and then having your green waste and mixing them together. And when I made that pile in that video, it came up about halfway. And look at how much it has broken down. I can see tons of wood lice in here. It's looking a lot more soil-like in places already, but it's also just settled as well. And this will kickstart that composting process. And this, if I just left it like this, it would definitely be compost by late spring in the very latest. However, I have brought down this old obelisk and I've brought down the green waste from the polycrub, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to continue piling up even more waste as I have it. And in autumn you do tend to get big piles of stuff like leaves, and if you're weeding you'll get big piles of that as well, but also you will have small bits and bobs. And that's what I tend to do when I compost, is I just throw everything on as I have it and it works. It's super, super easy. But if you do have some big piles of stuff and you have been saving up your green waste and saving up your brown waste, watch my video, because it is so easy to create a compost pile that breaks down in months, really. And there's more information on how that all works and times of year and all of that. And I'll put that video up on the screen. Thank you so much for joining me this time, the garden in September. Let me know if you have any questions whatsoever and comments, and I will see you in a couple of weeks for another video here on Lovely Greens. Bye for now.